Hi everyone and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa, host of the Propcast and co-founder of LMRE, the global PropTech recruitment and search consultancy. In this podcast, we'll explore how the digital evolution of the real estate industry is impacting the property market. The aim of each episode is to introduce you to a PropTech innovator and discuss how their work has created a shift in focus when it comes down to digitizing the built environment. If you're interested in finding out more about PropTech or applying for a job in this space or keen to know who the big players are that are moving and shaking the real estate industry up, we have you covered, and we will be bringing you an episode each week to connect to the VCs, PropTech startups, and real estate professionals from around the globe. Also, a big shout out to our sponsors of the podcast, Dreamtech and Pretech, who you will hear from during the episode. Drum roll, please. I'm very excited to announce the launch of our brand new website. It's been designed with you in mind, so it's much easier to use, and if you ask me, it's extremely nice to look at. Shout out to the team for all that hard work designing and building all the features that our audience asked for. Applying for jobs or briefing us on a role has never been easier. Please visit www.lmre.tech and sign up for our emails to receive exclusive updates on the latest PropTech jobs and the best candidates in the global PropTech market. Today on the podcast, we are discussing what actually makes a building smart, and who better to talk about this than David Williams, Head of Smart Buildings at Microsoft, and Fanie, who's Head of Technology from Edge Technology. So welcome to the show, David and Fanie.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
On today's show, we will discuss what a smart building really is, and where we're seeing growth in demand in smart technologies, why the sector is obviously so important, and we'll also be learning what Microsoft Edge Technology is doing in this space and how they met and everything like that. Also, we'll be looking and talking through how to get into this growing vertical. David and Fanie will be discussing about the difference of the career pathways and how they got into the space themselves. So without further ado, let's get started with the questions. So David, I would love for you to begin with, how did you get into space? Obviously, your background was, RAF, and you've been at now Microsoft since 2005, and sure, your role has changed drastically since then. But how did you get into this space yourself?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Louisa. I served in the Air Force for over 20 years. So it was quite a career change to get into Microsoft. So as I said, been in the Air Force for over 20 years, reached a point I wasn't really enjoying it anymore. And it just so happened that I was leading a project on behalf of the UK Ministry of Defence when Microsoft were one of our suppliers. And one thing led to another, and they said, hey, have you ever thought about leaving the Air Force and coming to work for someone like us? So that's how I moved from the Royal Air Force into Microsoft. To be honest, how I stayed in Microsoft for the first few years, I have no idea. From a cultural difference, gosh, it couldn't have been more different, incredibly hierarchical, having to say yes, no to people that you probably didn't really respect, suddenly being in a meritocracy where people actually listen to you for your expertise rather than what you wore on your shoulder was a real shock. And then I worked at Microsoft for some years and then ended up in the smart buildings part of the company, where I worked in an innovation team where our responsibility was really doing scale-ups and startups inside the company. And one day we were tasked to look at what Microsoft could bring to the smart buildings party. And here I am 6 years later as the EMEA smart buildings lead, not quite the lead for all of Microsoft, but the EMEA lead responsible for our vision and our strategy and our partner ecosystem, and also communicating internally around what Microsoft brings to the smart building space.
Beautiful. Okay, so tell me about how did you guys first meet then as well? How has this beautiful partnership blossomed? David, maybe you can sort of elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yes, you know, I talked about the partner ecosystem. And what I mean by that is, Microsoft working with expert companies, us bringing the digital expertise, them bringing the prop tech and commercial real estate expertise. And that's how I started working with Edge Next. They stood out massively in Europe as one of the most innovative companies that I saw, from their history, from OVG, from Edge Technologies through to Edge Next. And Fanie, you'll do a much better job of explaining that. It was just obvious that we should be working really closely together. And actually, one of the things, and I'll come on to this maybe, is, Fanie, cover your ears up. They're great human beings as well, And at the end of the day, when you're trying to build partnerships and you're trying to develop, new industries and new businesses, you're going to hit rocks, you're going to hit hurdles, you have problems. And it's the human beings that drive that through. And I just found working with everybody from Kuhn at the top of the company all the way through, just great people to work with, always lent in, always wanted to try and solve problems. And so that's how I started working with them and why I continue to work with them to this day.
Yeah. Well, what a ringing endorsement, Fanie. Now, Fanie, your role is head of technology. What does that mean? How did you yourself get into Edge? And also for our audience listening, there's the difference between technology and Edge next. We briefly spoke about earlier. Now, not everyone knows that difference. So tell us all, and please elaborate on, for Edge as well, see how do you make buildings more efficient, more sustainable and healthier too?
Right. So I wasn't in like smart building space all my life, right? I'm an engineer by heart. And, being involved in all these industries like banking and agriculture and those kind of things. And maybe my accent can give you away. I'm from South Africa. So I've kind of started here in Netherlands and stuff like that. But I came across Edge technologies back in a time when I was working for Deloitte. And this is also where I know Eric Ubels. And Deloitte just happens to be in one of the world's most sustainable buildings back in the time, the Edge. And it's there where I was like, got this huge passion for like, hey, a smart building is actually one of the cool things you can get, right? It's different from a smart home. And working for Deloitte Digital at that time, doing a bunch of experiments, moved on. And eventually my paths crossed again at Edge Technologies and I came in as solution architect. And that's where I kind of met the Microsoft team that was working endlessly on our platform and helping us to kind of adopt Azure Digital Twins, which is one of the core technologies that we're using till this day, helping us onboard a lot of buildings into the platform and vice versa. So that's how we kind of met and cross paths with David and team. But as of head of technology of Edge Next, and maybe let's kind of circle back on that. So Edge Technologies is the old OVG real estate. They built super cool, green, sustainable buildings. And before the whole pandemic that happened, this was all kind of tied to Edge buildings. We built great buildings. And what is a building without a great smart building platform? So we kind of ship a smart building platform with that. With the pandemic and all, we realized there was a different need, also with working from home and also post-pandemic with people trying to optimize workspace. There's also ESG targets people want to do with in regards to sustainability. There's different needs. And also there's clearly a need for building owners that's non-Edge buildings to have a smart building platform. And it's there where we realized that our platform can actually cater for non-Edge buildings as well. That's pretty much how we rapidly expanded our portfolio in Edge and non-Edge.
Where are your buildings then?
We have a lot of buildings in Germany and Netherlands, and we have some in the US, and basically it's in Europe mostly, and we kind of slowly but surely expanding out where we can.
Beautiful.
Hi, I'm Nelson from Property Quants. We run a hands-on, in-depth course that will teach you to apply data science and machine learning to real estate. To learn more, visit propertyquants.com/training. We also run a revolutionary course that will allow anyone to gain data science skills without needing to learn programming. To learn more about that, visit thenocodecourse.com. On either site, be sure to key in the code LMRE5 for a special 5% discount.
Now, David, when we had breakfast, I think this is when things first started opening up. It was in the summer, and obviously I arrived late because I got horrendously lost in Paddington. You broke down what a smart building really is, and you summarized it into 3 boxes, and you put it in layman terms very kindly for me. And I'm sure some of our audience are drastically trying to learn more about this space. Could you tell the audience again what makes a building smart for those listening in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, there's many different ways to frame it, and I wouldn't claim to be an expert in this, but one of the things that I think is really important is to be able to create frameworks and mental pictures for people, because quite frankly, when people talk about smart buildings, it's everything from building management systems, access control, room booking, air quality. It affects both the people that are actually working in the building, the people that are responsible for the building. And frankly, that's just an enormous bunch of stuff. So, simplification is what it's all about. So in really simple terms, the way I like to think about it and the way I describe it to customers is in 3 layers. There's kind of like the base layer, as I think of it, which is the building itself. Then there's the middle layer. And for me, that's kind of what goes on in the building. And then at the top layer, it's how the people interact with the building. So at that base layer, you're really talking about things such like the building management systems, the fabric of the building. How does the building actually operate? The lighting systems, the security systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Middle layer is really to do with what's going on in the building. So it's to do with space utilization. It's to do with what online services. It might extend to the parking. It might to do with the health and the safety and security. But actually, the really interesting bit, as far as I'm concerned, is actually the bit at the top, which is how do people interact? So when I'm a human being and I'm coming into a big building, how do I interact with that building? What does that building say to me? What does it say about the people that I'm visiting in that building? Do they really think it's acceptable for me to stand and wait to get into the building these days? What's that tell you about what they care about me or the company I represent? How do I find it? How do I find the people I want to work with? How do I book a meeting space? How do I find the right space? So it's really that base, middle and top levels that I try and paint the picture. And the nice thing about that model is it can be done from either an occupier perspective. So whether you're a tenant in a building, whether you're an owner of a building, you're looking to maximize the asset value of that building, or whether you're an operator, facilities manager, whether you're responsible for both the hard and the soft FM. Again, that model kind of breaks down and you can start seeing how people work, interacting with those three layers, and then how digital technology can help them.
Yeah. And I guess this leads up very well into the next question, the changes you've both received, maybe from a tenant or an operator, or maybe from Edge Next, from your point of view in terms of this space. Fanie, what have you seen that your customers are sort of looking for? And I'm sure that's changed, as you mentioned, since the pandemic.
Well, like I mentioned before, the awareness of the future sustainability, like the net zero and carbon neutral post-pandemic, and the whole notion of getting back to work and, bringing people safely back to work, first of all, but also having them productive in the offices. This is one of the biggest things we've seen as an uptrend, but also if you look back at the whole ESG metrics and targets companies do well against to kind of make the world a better place for tomorrow. I think that those questions needs to be answered, and it's hard questions. We provide the tools to allow customers to work with the data.
And are you working, and maybe not you personally, but do you think that technology companies are working closely with the government now? Obviously, we have the UN sustainability goals. So surely there's got to be a lot more sort of communication and open conversations about these targets. Is that happening?
Well, I believe so. So I beg to kind of differ on a few things. I'm not an expert myself, so I can briefly talk you through the platform and what we do, but it's really up to the customer and what they do with the data. So, in terms of the insights we provide from a platform's perspective, they can put into their own little workflows or whatever to kind of talk to governments and also maybe make core decisions.
Yeah. So what sort of key data are your customers asking for then to sort of hit these goals?
So our cloud platform that's hosted in Azure, right? So we gather immense amount of data from basically any sensor. Like I mentioned before, that's non-edge buildings. So we really need to kind of cater for any sensor out there. The amount of data that a building provides is you cannot comprehend how much data it gives. But it kind of, the things that make sense is the energy, the air quality, the people counting, the occupancy, etc. There's a lot of different kind of data, but what we do as Edge Next, we have this, focusing on well-being, we're focusing on sustainability and asset allocation, basically. And having those pillars, we really do like a correlation between those three together to kind of see where the ends meet. Let me give you an example. Like, for instance, if the energy usage of a building dips in weekends, and you can clearly see that on a graph, right? But if the occupancy is high and the energy dips, or vice versa, there's something really fishy going on. So that's kind of how the data can be used together to kind of give you more insights on what's really happening.
And David, being a huge growth, which you've seen your partners, no doubt, are growing as well. It's not just Edge, it's Hunting others, so many of them. Despite the growth, what are the main challenges we're still facing in this industry in terms of sort of adoption and getting smart buildings seen as a proper asset class now?
Yeah, I would just go back a little bit on the previous one, maybe from a more macro perspective about kind of the trends, because it does feed into, I think, then the challenges that we're maybe seeing. And I think over the last sort of 6 years I've been involved, I think the three areas that I would say the major trends have changed is the technology. The technology now to enable you to make your building smart, whatever that means, has become so much more affordable in the last 6 years and easier to deploy. And I think then to answer your second question, which is around one of the challenges, is it's getting the industry to understand that. It's helping you understand that. It's helping construction companies, developers, FM companies understand that the technology has become more affordable. It is now relatively easy to deploy and to share that with them. The second area, kind of a trend, is to do with the work culture. Now, it's interesting. The pandemic, I don't think, has actually changed any trends. I genuinely don't think it has. But what it's done is it's accelerated trends that we're already seeing in the industry. Working from wherever. I'm not a great fan of the term hybrid. It implies kind of two choices. Working from wherever, providing the right technology underneath it, but also the right cultural changes to enable people to work wherever they want to work. And again, the challenge is getting management to accept that. I mean, some of the crazy statements I've seen, I won't call them out on this podcast, but I'm sure we're thinking of the same companies. They're making themselves sound like dinosaurs. You've got to be back in the office. You kind of go, oh, for goodness sakes, get the children back up the chimneys and get back in the, it's just crazy. So that is a big cultural change that companies are having to work through. And I'm respectful of that change. But my giddy aunt, we need to push that. We need to think about the people. And the last one is sustainability. Everyone's talking about sustainability. But in practical terms, what does that actually mean? What does it mean when we start thinking about buildings? And the simple stat that we throw out is 40% of energy is consumed in buildings in Europe. Okay? So if you can reduce your energy consumption, you're going to go a long way to start hitting your sustainability targets that every company and every human being should have now.
Yeah, I'd love to sort of pick up on your point you mentioned about sort of culture. And I was at Crete yesterday, and those listening who were there, it was bloody great to be back and see everyone. But Guy Rayner, he's the new global head of sustainability for JL, and he was talking about the cultural differences between obviously whether it's UK, Europe, and the US, and different levels of uptake, and down to obviously the people leading it, but also depending on the areas you live. If you're in an area affected by climate change, then obviously it's different area, how seriously you take it effectively. And there's definitely places in Europe which are leading the way in terms of smart buildings. Obviously, the changes we're seeing in the US, obviously from environments to coming, we'll probably see more obviously investment into that space too. But there's so many different moving parts that we're seeing.
Great.
Fanie, is there anything which you've seen particularly on your side as well in terms of sort of uptake? I'm sure your clients have gone through the roof, especially since you're opening up new buildings globally.
Yeah, absolutely. We just started off, so it's not like we've been in the business, the HNX been in the business for years, right? So we just started off as HNX, piloting a few buildings. And, what we've seen as a challenge, personally, I would say from an architectural point of view and also from a kind of a rollout point of view, is the standardization of the sensors and integrations and all those kind of things. Because each building is different, they integrate differently. It's really like a box of chocolates, right? So when you onboard this building, you are faced with many challenges. Like, how do you integrate? There's security issues, there's sensor issues, and there's maybe different clouds involved. It's all a case-by-case basis, really. And what we've tried to do with HNext is really have this whole standard model, right? To ingest data in a standard way, having protocols be leading instead of technology. So if we standardize things on a protocol level, the data just flows, and literally this drives our whole bring your own device capability to the next level. So those kind of things that I would say is challenging, especially for us.
Yeah, and I'm sure these challenges are faced by definitely other technology businesses out there too. The Propcast audience, we want to hear from you. We are adding a new segment to the podcast, and I'll be answering your burning questions live at the end of each episode. I'll be sharing all the tips, tricks, and insights LMRE has gained from being the global PropTech recruitment lead in this space. So please get in touch, head to www.lmre.tech, and drop us a message or question that you want answered. David, are there any other companies which are sort of entering the market or have been out there for a while, which is sort of leading the way up and obviously Edge?
I think the companies that excite me the most, that I get most excited working with, is actually non-digital technology companies. And that's probably going to upset some of my most important partners. Love equally, of course, and now crucially important. But what's really exciting is when you're working with companies that aren't used or aren't aware of how digital technologies can help them, how they can make the buildings better for the humans that work in them and look after them. And whether that be in the construction industry, clearly I'm going to point to Edge Next and their background, as OVG and Edge Technologies, and how they've, really used digital by partnering with Microsoft, have really, really adopted digital technology and are now differentiating themselves hugely. But I'd also talk about companies like YIT, one of the largest, probably are the largest Finnish and very significant Northern European construction company, who've basically just gone, hey, we need to change our business model. We need to change the way we're thinking. And how can we do that? Hey, we'll partner with Microsoft. We'll understand what is the art of the possible. Or someone like RXR Realty, or Realty, or however you'd pronounce it in America, in New York, massive real estate owner, manager and developer, and how they are just changing the way they work. Think about facilities management. Facilities management doesn't always seem to be the most exciting area, but it can be. It can be with the applications of digital technology. It really enables companies to review and change the way they do business from, the very largest commercial real estate services company in the world, like CBRE, who I work very closely with, to companies in the UK, for example, being really innovative, like Mighty. It's one of the UK's leading facilities management and professional services companies, really trying to change the way that they do business. And when they're open to change, it's an open conversation. They're not closed. When I meet with these guys, whether it be Edge, YIT, RXR, CBRE, or Mighty, it's an open conversation. They're hungry for information. And I am as well. I don't pretend to be an expert in their area of business, but the two of us coming together, and this is what I've really missed, of course, during the pandemic. It's people together in a room with whiteboards, whether they be electronic or physical whiteboards, and just pouring all that thought and energy into it, and amazing things that come out of it. So that's what I get excited about, as you probably tell, is working with companies that really at their heart are not digital technology companies yet, but that by working with someone like Microsoft can really help change. And I can see that change, and we can work together and kind of enjoy what we're doing.
Awesome. It's so nice to hear how passionate you are about it as well, David. And you say you're not an expert in the industry, but you sure know a hell of a lot more than the rest of us. And the same with you, Fanie, as well. Obviously, as this industry is growing, at LMRE, we hire people into all these emerging, growing sectors. And there is a massive talent shortage. And I was doing a webinar with the famous James Dyson Nexus Labs, and we were doing on DI of the smart buildings industry. And obviously, not only is it like a STEM industry, so famously undiverse, but there's plenty of challenges getting talent in. And what I'm apparently talking about is there's so many different roles within this space, and you don't have to go to a university and study at Brown and Harvard, or obviously you have an engineering sort of background, but there's so many different roles which you can learn sort of, whether it's on the job or site. Are there any sort of tips you both could sort of give people looking to enter this industry, or certain roles which are sort of growing within whether your firms or the general sort of space? This could go for either one of you, so whoever wants to start first.
There's two areas really, and the first one's going to sound terribly cheesy, and the second one probably a little bit more practical. But the first one is, it's like an industry. Do what you enjoy. If you enjoy what you're doing, it shows. It shows to everyone you work with. Personally, I can only be enthusiastic about something I care about. Looking back, when I stop enjoying something, when I stop caring, my performance declines. And that goes right back to why I left the Air Force. But equally, is if you look at roles in the construction industry, in the facilities management industry, in the asset management industry, and of course I'm going to be biased, I think the introduction of digital technologies into those industries, or those parts of the industry, can actually make it much more exciting and can make it more attractive to younger people coming out of university or not coming out of university. The opportunity to actually be working with technology and seeing how technology can change the way buildings and the way that human beings interact with those buildings. I've recently done some work with the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management in the UK. And that was the focus around that, was very much to say, look, in those industries, stop feeling like it's being done to you. Start owning it. Start understanding, if nothing else, the language that people use, so that you can bring your expertise and knowledge and background and you can start driving and informing the changes that are happening in the industry. So I really do think they're the two key areas: is engaging with the technology, understanding the language, but for goodness sakes, do something you enjoy.
Yeah, I couldn't say that even better because, even from my side, coming from all these kind of industries, ending up in prop tech, David, you said it so well. But just kind of on a technical note, right? So the adoption of IoT it's now better, but it wasn't as good as it is today. And, what I've also realized, people get scared of IoT. What is this IoT thing, right? And what they need to realize is just IoT is just a computer, and having accessibility, online, Microsoft does a great job of .NET that runs everywhere. It's really not that hard to learn, right? In terms of coding, there's so many things out there. And I mean, I'm calling out to all the developers out there, you could really change the world, and, be part of this whole thing, be part of the movement.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And everyone sort of listening in, I completely echo that. We spend so very long doing our work, and especially now with this new, well, I'm about to say hybrid work, but David, you hate that word, how we're spending more time basically working because none of us know how to switch off. You got to enjoy what we do and be passionate about it. For those new to LMRE, we're a global recruitment and search consultancy focusing on placing the best talent into the prop tech and real estate industry. We're extremely fortunate to work alongside the best VCs in the ecosystem to help scale their portfolios and their own teams. We've even had a couple of them on the podcast, such as Meshprop and Fifth Wall, who joined me back in season 1. We've recently started a campaign on our YouTube channel spotlighting a number of VCs from around the globe to take the opportunity to spotlight their business, portfolios, and gain advice from the inside for those looking to access the VC world from both capital and talent perspective. So, are you looking for funding for your own business, or interested in the VC landscape? How do they handpick their cohorts? Or if you're just a curious mind that wants to learn more, check it out. Head to LMRE on YouTube, or you can find their interviews on our website. Now on with the show. And unfortunately, we are coming to the end of the show, but obviously we've got the LMRE part. So David and Fanie, I'll talk you through it. David, you can start us off. So L is, what's a major lesson you've learned throughout your career? So it's probably been do something that you love or something like that. Has mention anyone, a product, and give someone a shout out. R is what's been the most rewarding part of working in the space, and E, what are you most excited about? So David, if you could run us through yours, and to you.
Sure. I kind of used both my best material already because, the lesson is, like I said, I'm not going to reiterate it, but it is about doing what you enjoy, engaging with the technology, and becoming a thought leader in your industry. I think that is, find your niche, find something that enthuses you and really makes you want to make a change. So that's my lesson. My M about my mention. Again, I've actually mentioned them, the companies that I've already mentioned, EdgeNext, YIT, RXR, CBRE, Mighty, these are companies that are not technology companies, that are, embracing technology to fundamentally change the way that they're doing business. And I think if I was thinking about a service I'd mention, digital twins. Lots of people talk about digital twins, but realistically, they're out there now and they can work. So anyone listening to this podcast, please don't think that they're a pipe dream. They exist. Rewarding. What's the most rewarding part? Partnering, without a shadow of doubt. Helping prop tech experts understand digital technology and how they can revolutionize the way they think and improve things for people. That working with other people, that bringing together of knowledge, expertise, experience, me from a digital technical perspective, the prop tech experts from their areas, that is so much fun, bringing those ideas together and coming up with the solutions to problems. And what am I excited about? I think one of the areas I get most excited about when think about prop tech is actually bringing ideas and expertise from other industries to bear. And I think that's where a company like Microsoft can really help, because we work across all industries. We see other things, we see developments, we see evolutions, we see revolutions. And it's always brilliant to bring those to bear. Just a quick example, I was talking to a hospital about waiting rooms, and I started talking about the way airports move people. And you could see it in their eyes. You could see them going, oh, bloomin' heck, yeah. Maybe if we started thinking about that now, you might not sell quite so much perfume in a hospital, but you get the general idea, bringing those ideas from other industries to another industry and say, well, think about this, and introducing them, letting them have that conversation.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, David. David, you are very good at speaking and you have a voice of an angel. So it disclosed so well. Fanie, right. Tell us, what's sort of one of the main lessons you've learned throughout your career?
I think the bar has been set quite high.
I know.
Well, my lessons, I haven't been in tech as long as David has, right? So my lessons that I've been learning, especially as an architect, is that, tech isn't leading, and, the technology is an enabler, right? So the business cases, the questions, the problems people face, companies face, that determines the technology, right? So it's a flip side. Instead of choosing the technology first and then seeing what problems we can solve. And in terms of the mentions, I would like to mention, Eric Ubel's a visionary in the field, and also Microsoft, the digital twins team, especially for kind of working so closely with EdgeNext, making sure we get onboarded in the right places, in the right track, and giving us support when we need it, how we need it. And then in terms of the rewarding thing for me is just making a difference, not just the prop tech industry, but also making a difference in developers' life, or even showing people how things could be. And when you show someone something, it kind of brings that smile on their face. I can go home and I know that I've made my day better. And the things that I'm excited about in PropTech specifically is smart cities, and how autonomously these smart cities can operate, but also cohesively, if that makes sense. So smart cities is for me kind of on a dot on the horizon, and I'm super excited to see where we head towards that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm surprised you didn't both say, how excited to make the world a more sustainable, better place. Greta Thunberg would be delighted to hear that. So cliche. No, honestly, guys, thank you both for sharing all those insights. And it was brilliant to hear how well your partnership is going as well. And no doubt it will grow further. I'll catch up with you both after the podcast. But yet again, thank you for joining me.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Hey, this is Michael Beckerman from Cretech. I'm here to invite you to check out Cretech Plus, the first streaming platform devoted to innovation and technology in the built world, featuring new weekly videos from the world's leading real estate and tech professionals. The first month of streaming is absolutely free, and then you could use the code LMRE to receive 25% off your second month. To learn more, visit plus.cretech.com.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our guests and our sponsors, Cretech and Reynders. Make sure you visit our website, lmre.tech, where you can subscribe to our newsletter, keep up with our industry news and events, or if you're looking for your next career move, it's all on there. The Propcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, where all good content is found. Whilst we're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate it if you could spread the word and tell a friend about it, or even write us a review. And I'll catch you next week.